Yeah.
Morning, Dixie.
All right, so we're going to get started, and just let me make my friend Pamela the presenter. Just a second here.
I'm not used to being on this end.
Uh-huh.
There we go.
All right. Well, this is Greg Warner. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We've been bantering a little bit here, waiting for folks to get on. And okay, so I have a very special guest today. I'm very happy, very excited to be talking about my favorite things, which are donor surveys. And Pamela Grow is going to help us. She's really an expert, specializing mostly with small shops have been her focus, but you may know her from being one of her many of among 20,000, 23,000 subscribers to her Grow report. And also, she has been listed as one of the 50 most influential fundraisers by Civil Society magazine. So I see Pamela's beautiful face kind of all over the place on the internet, and I always see people sharing her brilliant words. So without further ado, we're going to get into how to raise major gifts and planned gifts with donor surveys. And I'm going to stay on the line because I have a feeling that Pamela is going to want me to answer some questions here and there. So take it away, Pamela.
Oh, absolutely. Well, happy Wednesday, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I absolutely do love the work of MarketSmart, and I'm so honored to be joining you here today. Let me get into, let's see. There we go. How's that? Everybody can see my screen okay?
That looks great.
This is terrific. So by the end of today's presentation, I hope that everyone here is going to be convinced that surveying your donors regularly is one of the smartest things you can do. You're going to find out why you need to survey your donors. We'll talk a lot about what kinds of questions to ask, especially for uncovering potential planned gifts and major gifts prospects. You'll know which donors to survey, and you'll know which mediums to use. I think that a lot of nonprofit organizations, at least this is the feedback I'm getting from my list, they might be a little apprehensive about what's going on in the United States politically and maybe about the next 4 years. But trust me on this, when you've got a better understanding of your donors' motivations, of their passions, of their commitments, you can really move forward to grow those donor relationships. First off, I'd like to get a little poll going and get a feel for where our audience is on this topic. Everybody's pretty familiar with the chat box. The chat or the question box, if you could go in and let me know if you have ever surveyed your donors. And I'm just going to give everybody a minute or two to, and I actually can't see that.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at it for you. So
Thanks.
please, everybody, don't use the polls area. Just chat into the chat area whether or not you have ever surveyed your donors, yes or no, or kind of, sort of.
Believe it or not, I get that response quite a bit when I ask questions on polls.
Well,
Kinda.
and my I'm gonna say, looking at these, it's about 60-40, 60% with a no and about 40% saying yes. It's very
Ooh,
unscientific.
ooh, okay.
And there's a few kind of sortas, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, why exactly do we want to ask for feedback? You know, you mentioned this. I really love Greg's book on this topic, which is a free download, but we've been getting and giving feedback since birth. You know, children look to their parents for feedback on everything, on their place in the world. And then when we start going to school, we get our feedback in the form of grades, and employees get feedback in the form of reviews. Captain of a ship might use feedback to confirm or change their course. And what's more, who doesn't love to give feedback. Who doesn't love to share their opinion? Everyone's got one. When was the last time you bought a product on Amazon without checking the reviews? And I got to tell you, I have my daughter, my oldest daughter, is a dedicated Yelper. She posts for just about everything. Even more, donors like to take surveys. They're interested in your organization. They're kind of naturally curious about what kinds of questions they're going to be asked. They want to feel like they're part of your organization, that they actually have a hand in shaping it. They want to be heard. And this is a great one too. Don't we all want to be thought of as helpful people? And of course, the research has shown that if you're, getting your supporters to do something other than donate, increases their propensity to give to you. So in short, if you're serious about growing your relationships with your donors, surveying makes good sense. There's lots of reasons to survey your donors, including the fact that you'll raise more money. And remember the old adage, ask for money, you'll get advice. Ask for advice, get money twice. I love that one. You survey to obtain data on who your donors are. You'll get feedback on ideas, initiatives, or policies. You can really identify your 80-20 and you can zero in on your best major or planned gift opportunities. You can strengthen your acquisition. You can measure donor satisfaction. And you can capture demographic information that you're not gonna, you really can't buy it. So this story that I'm about to share with you is probably the absolute most basic surveying story you're ever going to hear. And to share this with you, I have to actually go back to the year 2000 when I accepted my very first fundraising job. I had been working for 7 years as a communications officer with a regional foundation, a grant-making foundation here in the Philadelphia area. And I took on a 15-hour-a-week development director job for our regional ambulance corps. Part of the reason I did this, I wanted to stay home more with my kids. So we didn't get any state or federal funding, and individual donors made up a lot of our budget, a great deal, and I was tasked with creating a development department from the ground up. For those of you who have run one-person development departments, you know it's really challenging. This particular organization, they had run a really successful capital campaign about 5 years earlier. They'd raised over $5 million for their brand new facility. They hadn't done anything since. They had ignored their major donors. They'd gotten quite a bit of foundation funding, and they hadn't written a single grant foundation proposal in 5 years. The businessman who had spearheaded their capital campaign had died. And I've got to tell you too that the organization was so mired in dysfunction that I didn't get those records from the capital campaign until about 2 years into the job. Their annual appeal was just an absolute mess. It had been declining for 5 straight years because it had been outsourced to a number of different mail houses. And the more I dug into it, the worse things looked. I don't know if anyone can relate to this situation, but I know that, we all have our stories. The closest I had never done any fundraising. The closest I'd come to fundraising experience was actually reviewing grant proposals. And I thought that I'd taken on way more than I could handle. I even came close to quitting. And the internet was new at the time. There weren't, the huge amount of resources that are out there today. But I made out a plan, and the first thing I did was query the one database that I had access to. I randomly selected 20 loyal donors who had given over $250 a year during the past 5 years. And keep in mind that these were donors who had given every single year for 5 years or more, despite totally non-existent stewardship of any kind of reporting. These were loyal donors. So I wrote a letter, basically a letter introducing myself. I'm new here. I really need your advice. I really need to know why you supported this organization. Of course, I started out by thanking them for their past support. And I sent it out along with a really brief, I think it was 2 or 3 question survey and a stamped self-addressed envelope. So what were the results of my very, very basic, almost primitive survey all those years ago? Remember, I sent out 20 letters. I got back 18 responses. Several of them sent in checks, even though I hadn't asked for any money. 3 of them became major donors. And those responses, they formed the basis for my first really wildly successful direct mail appeal. So we were finally back on track. So what kind of lesson do you think that taught me? And I think you're pretty familiar with this as well, Greg. Your donors are really starved for attention. So before we get started today, let's dive into the ins and outs in surveying. And the most important thing before you get started, I want you to get really, really clear on your goal for your survey. Because if you don't have a clear-cut goal, and I've seen this in a couple of instances with surveys that I've gotten in the mail, where they kind of include every question under the sun. It's like everything but the kitchen sink. Every single question that you ask needs to be carefully thought out. You really need to have a goal for your survey. You don't want to waste your donors' time. So we're going to start out by asking, what kind of questions should you ask in a donor survey? And we'll be reviewing a number of questions that are taken directly from a variety of nonprofit surveys. And I don't know about you guys, I don't know about you, Greg, but I really like to see real-world examples. So you want to include questions to uncover your donors' passions. Why do they give? This is the most important thing in fundraising. Why do your donors support you? This is an example of a question from, I feature a few of the questions from the Redwood. This is a shelter for battered women in Canada. I think that when they get the results back from this survey, they're going to know that firsthand that someone who maybe has been affected by domestic violence, their commitment level is going to be a lot stronger than maybe someone who just prefers to give locally. For an animal organization, I think the questions for animal organizations, I think fundraising for animal organizations, I always feel like they have an easier job of it. And I get this a lot from my subscribers, from my students. Well, we don't have an easy mission like babies or animals. And this is true. Knowing about your supporter's particular animal is going to help the organization speak directly to them in follow-up communications. I love this one, which I actually can't remember which one this is from, but it's from an animal organization. This one is from St. Joseph's Healthcare Foundation in Canada. And here we've got Amnesty International. They're asking questions about their different areas of work. And Riverfront Recapture is a environmental organization in Connecticut. And they ask about specific offerings that their donors might be attracted to. I love this one from Benedictine College. This goes pretty deep in exploring why the college's work is important to the donor. You can also ask questions to figure out your donor's communication preferences. Direct mail, email, only once a year. Questions to uncover your supporters' demographics. This is from Sandy Hook Promise. And knowing whether the supporter is a gun owner or how they fall into the political spectrum is good information to have. I can hear you, Greg. Did you have a
Oh,
comment on this?
no, no politics.
This is a first-time survey this is from a small organization. It's a Riverfront Recapture. Mary kind of had the feeling that longtime residents might have a greater commitment to their mission. So she asked this question, and she said that when she got back the responses, she said, one woman told us about hearing river stories from her dad, who used to take dates out in a boat on the Connecticut River. She used our parks, and her grandkids joined our rowing program. Later on, I used her story for one in a series of email stories asking for support. You might also want to include questions on donor loyalty. I would kind of steer clear of information that you already have or you should have, and instead include questions that speak to commitment. And this one is a great one from Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Of course, storytelling is the foundation of great fundraising. And a lot of us, we're just not doing enough of it. Survey questions are perfect for uncovering your donors' stories. You will get a lot out of open-ended essay questions. And you remember when I talked about my first survey way back in 2000? That was pretty much, I think, 2 or 3 open-ended essay questions. This is something I actually did want to ask you about. I wanted to ask your opinion, Greg. Do you have any thoughts about how many essay questions you should include in a survey?
Sure, that's a great question. We like to call them open boxes or open
Mhm.
comment boxes. And to me, anytime that it seems appropriate that somebody might want to elaborate further with you, then you should give them that opportunity. So if you look at it from the donor's perspective, if you've just sort of enticed them to consider something and think about their life story and how it entwines with your organization's mission, it's almost not nice to stop it there with just a couple of check boxes. You know, give them the opportunity to engage. They can always, it's like being invited to a party. They can always decline. They don't have to fill out the comments area. But I say
Oh,
just about as
seriously,
many
yeah.
times as seem appropriate. But then again, your survey really shouldn't be more than like 10 to 15 questions tops. I mean, tops. Anyway, so hopefully, I hope that answered the question for you.
Oh, yeah, very much. Especially, I mentioned earlier about including everything but the kitchen sink. I think you want to be really cognizant of your donor's time and not go crazy. And 10 questions is perfect.
Yeah, and while we're on that line, just real quick, is that the worst thing you can do is get every department involved in it, especially if your aim is to raise major gifts and legacy gifts, which are the big ones, of course. Then you really don't want to bring your marketing department. Well, I mean, politically you might, but your marketing department, your PR department, and then and then their parents, and then their cousins, and then well, their kid kind of took a course about surveys in college 3 years ago. No, no, no. You know, don't do that. It'll water it down, and everybody will throw in a million questions, and it won't serve the purpose to really help you generate leads and get major gifts and planned gifts.
Oh, seriously, and thanks for raising that because as you know, I come from a history of small shops and I'm used to kind of like doing it all. You want to include questions to measure donor satisfaction. I believe strongly that the future of fundraising lies in amazing customer service. You might include a question asking if your donors feel valued and appreciated. You know, this one from Amnesty International is pretty good. But this one from the Holocaust Museum is fabulous. It really speaks to both supporter satisfaction and the donor's passions. Did you want to say anything about this one, Greg? Because I really do love this one.
Yeah, well, this is a question that's trying to help us understand where there are gaps in, well, where there are pluses and also where there are minuses in the opinions of the donors on an aggregate, uh, but also from the individuals themselves. So, if, for instance, then after looking at the response, and you know that a lady named Julie answered this and she said she wasn't satisfied with something that you darn well thought she was very satisfied with, from your personal relationship as a gift officer, and that's you, she's on your caseload, then that would be very good information to know. And now you
Yeah.
can try and understand, why are you not satisfied with that, and maybe we can rectify that, because that's actually her program of choice.
You know, you might also include questions to recruit new donors. And again, this is from an organization that I support, Sandy Hook Promise. How likely are you to recommend Sandy Hook Promise to a friend, family member, or colleague? And Greg, what are some additional questions that an organization might use to recruit new donors?
Well, I think it's really important, especially because, of course, if you know me, we focus on major gifts and planned gifts. So,
Mhm.
if you would ask them if they would be likely to want to give information to a friend, family member, or colleague, and then you could have a drop down, instead of what is the reason, you could say, well, what's the name of that person? And then another one saying, would you like us to send the information to them? Or would you, in your name, or would you like to do it? Or would you like to have a would you like us all to get together? So if you can close a meeting to get a cup of coffee and talk about the mission together, now you're kind of creating almost a giving club. And if you've been targeting major donors all the time, you know that they're going to swim in the same circles. and hang out at the same watering holes as other wealthy, high capacity members of the community. So getting this is really what we call in the private sector. We call this referrals, and getting
Yes.
referrals for major donors is the key to that area of any donor survey. Is trying to find more major donors.
So what about prospective planned giving donors? What type of question should you include on your survey? These are kind of obvious. This one, again from Redwood, the Shelter for Women and Children in Canada, included this particular question. They have a robust monthly giving program, so they're definitely interested in finding any donors who are interested in joining their monthly donor program. Amnesty International includes a question about speaking to a planned giving officer. And so does St. Joseph's Foundation in Canada. But look at this one. This is from Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. So take a minute to read it right now. And then, Greg, I'm wondering if you would mind speaking to the questions in this one as well as the Benedictine College questions on the following slide.
Sure. I'll just give about 3 seconds, let people read it. Okay, so the planned gift or the legacy gift question is a very challenging question, okay, because the minute that you start talking about legacy giving, you remind people of their own mortality. And anytime that you trigger that in a person's brain, their brain shuts off. Okay, we are all programmed to stay alive. Nobody wants to think about their own mortality. That's why, at least for me, when I was making my first will after my children were born, it I think it took me like a year. And the lawyer had to keep chasing me to finally get it done. And same with the insurance agent. You know, nobody ever wants to really attend to these matters. So you got to be very careful about how you talk about legacy gifts. And we've tested these questions on thousands of surveys. So what we've learned is that number one is that you want to use the law of social norms. In other words, start off by expressing that many people like to leave a gift. This is something that others like to do. So it's something you can be comfortable with is what we're implying. And we don't call it a bequest because bequest we have found is the number one biggest turnoff and most misunderstood word. So the funny thing about bequest marketing and bequest lead generation is to never use the word bequest. But people understand the idea of a will or a trust. Beneficiary designation, although we all have them in bank accounts, when we open up a bank account or a stock fund or something, we all understand it, but it's just kind of a jargony word. So using social norms, talking about a will, not a bequest, and then trying to determine the level of consideration that people are at and not being afraid to get a no. So it's okay to put a hard line at the bottom there saying I will never be interested in this kind of gift, and doing so actually helps people to categorize themselves. But what we've found over the years of surveying donors over time for the same clients is that many of these people who say they will never be interested, what they're really saying is they don't want anybody to ever call them. Because we've seen that those people actually end
Yeah.
up leaving legacy gifts.
Also had this one from Benedictine College, which I really liked. And another point, you said something earlier about kind of making it comfortable, making it the norm. And I think it's great to share the plan giving stories on your website. I don't see enough organizations doing that.
Yes, I agree. Plan giving stories are terrific, and not only that, but engaging your donors to capture those stories and asking them their story,
That,
even if they only want to keep it anonymous between you and them, is a great way to create that bond between you, them, and the mission. So asking for their stories is I believe an essential part of the fundraising process.
absolutely. So we're always looking, and we talked about this the other day, Greg, we're always looking outside of our donor databases for that next great major donor. But 99 times out of 100, they're lurking right inside your database. So, what are some of the questions that can help you uncover prospective major donors? Um, does your donor have capacity? Finding out if they have a family foundation or a donor advised fund would kind of indicate so. Does anybody know who this is? Do you know who this is, Greg?
No, sorry.
I love this lady. This is Elizabeth Verdot. She was a former art teacher and she was a Detroit public school teacher. And she was hardly the kind of person that you would expect to leave a $2 million gift to the Detroit Institute of Arts. She had never married, she didn't have any children, and her only living relative was a distant cousin who lived out of state. So, knowing whether your donor has children, how highly educated they are, these are two demographics that have been proven to lead to much higher gifts. And I know a lot of people who have Elizabeth's picture up above their desk. As a matter of fact, their plan giving officer after she passed, and they actually had no idea. She said she just wished she had known so she could have given her a great big hug. And here are some questions. This one's from the Asian Art Museum, and this one is from Lutheran Immigration and Refugee. This, again, they ask age, marital status, children, education level.
Now the
Steph,
thing
you want to know?
the thing about the age, I'm sorry, the thing about the absence of children and the education level is that thanks to the research of Dr. Russell James at Texas Tech, 20-year study, he was able to derive that people who don't have children and are highly educated tend to be not only really great planned gift prospects, but they give much more dollars than people than otherwise. So as the education level goes down and the number of children goes up, the amount of money that gets left decreases. So I hope that makes sense. But of course, you're showing mostly our surveys, and we always try and find people without children is a nice bonus, and especially highly educated is terrific.
So, what else? There are a lot of considerations before you actually embark on surveying your donors. But I want you, wherever you're at, to get inspired today and to get started. This is a question that I get a lot. Should you include an ask when you're sending out your donor survey? And this is again from St. Joseph's Healthcare Foundation in Canada. And you can see here that they did include an ask. And a lot of fundraising consultants would recommend that you do so and even tell you that you're leaving money on the table if you don't.
Can I jump in and tell you? Well, yeah. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. You put that in there. Yeah, very good. I was about to squash that. Go ahead,
I know,
Pamela.
but again, we go back to that, and I can't even remember where it comes from. Ask for money, get advice. Ask for advice, get money twice.
Yep.
It's a good thing to like hang over your desk.
Yeah, when you're talking about major gifts and planned gifts, look, these are long considered sales, so to speak. I mean, you're going to close, it's not a annual fund donation. So the trick is more to get the lead, find out about the person's interests, their demographics, why they care, what programs they want to support, and then cultivate that relationship either in person or by email or otherwise, by letters over time in a highly relevant and very personalized and contextual way because you want
Mhm.
the $100,000 gift. You don't want to upset them by asking for $100 gift now, and then they potentially don't fill out the survey, which we've found is that asking for that money does depress response rates a bit. You want to get the information, not be penny wise and pound foolish.
Exactly. Well said. So when should you survey your donors? You can definitely survey them in a new donor welcome pack. I don't know what your thoughts are on new donor welcome packs, Greg, but I'm a big fan of them. I've reviewed quite a few welcome packs, and I've received quite a few because I am a donor.
Yes, I 1000% recommend putting a survey in there with the welcome pack, but also immediately after people make a donation online, they should get a opportunity to give feedback and take a survey just about anywhere. I mean, you could promote it on. The only time I really strongly do not believe you should ever put a survey in is with a annual fund ask. Okay, if you're asking for your annual fund donation, you do not want to complicate that ask with a survey request because if you do, you're more likely to get people filling out surveys. They will not donate.
Exactly. It's a distraction. It's a distraction. But I did want to get your feedback because remember when I mentioned that I got the one in a new donor welcome kit that just had every question under the sun? And
Oh,
one of
right.
those questions was if I would be interested in leaving a gift in my will. So I really thought that that was jumping the gun, and I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, there's two trains of thoughts on this. Is that you want to make your legacy gift marketing ubiquitous, and it doesn't really hurt that much to be putting a little checkbox almost everywhere. But it does seem, in that context, when they're a new donor and you're saying welcome, it does seem a little bit odd, I would say, that on the first date that you're asking them to, get
I
married.
know, right?
Yeah.
I was really a little taken aback. You should, and then this is another area where I actually want your feedback on about how often you should do a mailing to identify planned and major gift prospects.
That's a great question, and it's one of the questions that someone asked in the questions area. So whoever that was, we're getting on top of that right away here. And okay, so what we do, we recommend at least, well, generally once a year, and the reason why is a because if you get, and we get an average of a 9% total response rate. Not that's among all of our clients, and there's hundreds of clients in 4 countries that we serve. And I also should tell you that our response rates tend to be about double what anybody else gets uh, or more. That's because we've tested everything like crazy. But if you test if you send out to I'm sorry, if you get 9% response rate, that still means 91% did not respond. Okay, so that means you can still survey those people again. Now, whether you do it 6 months later or whatever is up to be debated. But we recommend that you survey your donors once a year. But in particular, in subsequent years, you really need to show them that you know them. In other words, if someone said that
Yes.
they were interested in making a legacy gift, then or even better, but if they said that they intend to make it or something like that, they should definitely get a different kind of survey than someone who said, I am not interested at all. Or, of course, if they're already in the, if they said that I already left a gift, they should get a Legacy Society oriented donor survey. So the trick for your yearly surveys is to almost perform a moves management function to see if people have changed their minds and moved. And you might want to include other questions that will help move the relationship in a different way.
Absolutely. And I love what you said just now. Show me that you know me.
Yeah.
That's so key to good fundraising. So where are we? And we didn't talk about this, but I always recommend following up after an event. Just include a survey as part of your processes for turning those event attendees into donors. And I work primarily, as Greg mentioned earlier, I work primarily with smaller nonprofits. Smaller nonprofits oftentimes have a tendency to rely on their events for fundraising. But the whole purpose of the event is to turn the attendee, the ticket buyer, into a donor, and surveying can help that. And yeah, once you see the value of donor surveying, and I think you'll get real excited when you send out your first survey, just like I did, I think that you will want to include at least one survey as part of your overall communications plan every single year. And now we come to the question of how you will share your survey. And you really want to meet your donors where they're at. Think about the channel that they came in from. I kind of prefer direct mail with an option for an online survey. When you're using direct mail, make it look and feel like an appeal. You might want to include a story. Do include a very clear message and a deadline. And if you promise to give any kind of feedback, make sure that you follow up on that. Here's a couple of examples. This is a survey from Benedictine College. They include a letter along with a several-page survey. We've got right there. But if they prefer, and I love that PS there, the donors are given the option of completing the survey online.
Which, by the way, is a great way to get people to end up giving you their email address.
Yes, yes. You might include a newsletter. Again, this is from St. Joseph Healthcare Foundation. They included a super, super donor-focused print newsletter with the survey that they sent out. This is an example I really wanted to share with you. It's strictly online. I actually don't know if Soy Dog Foundation does any direct mail. I've been following. I've been a fan of Soy Dog for many years, just from studying their monthly giving program and their social media fundraising, which is pretty brilliant. They've actually managed to raise, I don't even know how much now, several million, I think, a year using Facebook and their monthly donor program. So this is an email that I got from the Soy Dog Foundation in Thailand. Even though I was super, super busy the day that it landed in my inbox, I mean, who could resist? And the promise short survey really intrigued me. And then once I clicked on to take the survey, I got this, which of course goes with my My whole motto of always leading with gratitude. I really like the lead into this survey. And of course, Cialdini gives us yet another reason to survey your donors. We'll go through this super quickly. They asked 5 questions. They asked about you and your dog. And I love this one. How would you describe the dog's personality? Who could resist responding to that? I just think this is a super getting to know you survey. And here's that commitment question and volunteering. Because as you said, Greg, volunteerism is really, how did you put it?
I call it the gateway drug to major giving. Gateway
I
drug
love
to
it.
major giving, yes.
So I hope everybody is getting kind of excited about conducting your own surveys. We want to be really clear. I'm going to do a little recap and then we're going to talk a little bit about processing your surveys. You want to start out by being really, really clear about your survey's goals. You want to make sure your questions are well thought out and strategic, every single question. And that means, like Greg said earlier, about really not having anyone else involved. You want to make your survey feel like an appeal mailing. And you want to know how you're going to process those surveys. So I'm getting through the slides a little bit early today because I know everybody's going to have a lot of questions
There
and
are a
we
lot
want
of
to have
questions,
plenty of
indeed.
time to take your questions. But first off, I really like to hear if you guys are excited now about surveying your donors. And if you're not, why not? If you could just type into the chat box there or the question box.
So there are a lot of questions rolling in, actually, and I'm going to get to those. This comes to the part of the program where Greg Warner and MarketSmart do their like public service or advertorial announcement about why we're doing this and how we help people. So if you want to tune out, you don't want to hear a little advertisement about MarketSmart, be my guest. But I'm going to take the screen back from you in just a second here. And then after I'm done with that part, then we're gonna get back to the questions. So here, without any further ado on that, I'm going to show my screen. And what I'm going to talk about here real quick is that MarketSmart is a major gift and legacy gift marketing and software technology firm. I'd like to say that we're technologists, and we support consultants, but we generate leads for major gifts and for legacy gifts. Okay, so if your legacy society looked like this before, or if your caseload for high capacity major donors looked like this before, and you want it to look like this, you work with us. And usually what we start with is a survey platform, which we unabashedly call the most powerful donor survey tool ever created, because it's like Survey Monkey on super duper steroids, and there's nothing like it anywhere else in the world. So first I'll just run through some quick success stories for a big museum, 4,000 major donors, only major donors targeted, and we got a 4% response rate. Generally, major donor campaigns get a little bit lower response rate than a planned gift campaign. But the ages are always seemingly about the same, and of course we tend with major gifts wanting to look for some older folks. We have people that disclose that they're interested in making legacy gifts. They want to talk face to face with a gift officer, which is a lot easier than a gift officer making a cold call to set up a meeting. We uncover whether people have donor advised funds or family foundations. And if they do, well, that's information you can't buy from wealth screening. So it's really important to capture that, all that kind of information, and what kind of assets they might want to give, appreciated assets especially, things like that, that you just can't buy this kind of information. And then seven, of course, we're saying that they were willing to make a personal introduction to a friend. That's big. That's what we call referrals of like-minded major gift type people. Another one, real quick, a big animal welfare organization located here. Well, they're international, but they're located here in DC. 10,000 emails. That got a 12.5% response rate. That's not an open rate, and that's not a click rate. That is a response rate. Okay. Again, we've tested this stuff like crazy, so we tend to do better. I'm not trying to knock you if you have your in-house department do it, but we know how to do these things. We do hundreds of them each year. 257 stating that they'd consider giving through a donor advised fund or a family trust. 17, we actually measure our technology. If you know anything about MarketSmart, is that our technology tracks people online. It's a little spooky, but that's what we do. And we know where they click throughout the website and throughout landing pages, and if they download or watch videos or whatever. So we know that those people, 17 of the 257 actually clicked on the donor advised fund button, and 66 went on to give online. And in the end, this survey raised $31,000, and we didn't get a final number, but it kept coming in. So generally, our surveys pay for themselves, but we don't ask for money. We rarely ask for money. It's not a. We find that depresses response. And we got hundreds of highly qualified major gift opportunities for building caseloads, in addition to lots of downloads for information for legacy gifts. Five of them emailed, they actually clicked on a portion of a subsequent web page. Using our tracking technology, we could see which five people, this is not just anonymous data, we know who the people are, and five of them emailed bequest language to somebody. We do lose track. We don't know who they emailed the bequest language to, but we can tell from the click history that they did email bequest language to somebody. The button says to an advisor, so we're assuming they sent it to an advisor. We found 66 previously hidden secret legacy gifts were uncovered, and 38 said that they were interested in learning more about legacy giving. So these surveys are very powerful. These are just some of our clients' little quips and testimonials about these. And we've made it a cornerstone for most of our clients' efforts throughout the year. And by doing so, it not only increases their annual fund because they gain all this great information, but really the key is with the 80-20 is that they increase, they build caseloads, they increase major gifts, and they help generate legacy gifts. Now, I'm going to jump around real quick and finish off that, the great thing about this is that in our dashboard, we end up finding out what ages people are, whether they have children or not, things, other data that you can't buy. And you end up getting either piles of surveys through the mail, and you get very happy people, donors who you're basically generating leads for your gift officer's team. Now, finally, I won't go too deep into this, but this is a quick look at our dashboard where your team will be able to look at the results of the efforts of any survey campaign using the platform, and that way you can see who's considering a gift, how many people have already left a gift, how many people are may consider it. And then there's our lead qualification scoring, where you can always sort by top scores, which we worked on with Dr. Russell James to determine, as a for instance. And by the way, the last names are left anonymous here uh, because, well, for obvious reasons. But this guy, you can see clearly, well, he already left a gift. He's got a high score. He's no longer hot. He hasn't clicked in the past 1 to 3 months, and his score impact is quite high. We can see that he's downloaded some guides. He indicated he'd like to give from a family foundation. He'd talked to a gift officer. He's got no children, on and on. And then, of course, you can see his web activity going all the way back to 2015. We can see where he's been clicking and what PDFs he's been downloading and which emails have been opened and clicked. In addition to all the responses from his surveys, not only from 2016, but from 2015. So there's a lot more bells and whistles in there, but I'm going to end the little sales pitch here and just kind of go back to the questions. If everybody's wow, almost everybody's still here. Okay, they didn't want this. They
Hey,
didn't
and
mind
look
the
at
sales
that.
pitch. Thank you.
Everybody's excited about doing a survey, which was the yay.
Yeah, just about everybody's still here. So the questions keep rolling in, and I'm gonna try to get to everybody. But boy, there kind of are a lot here. So um, okay, so would a survey be? And I may kind of take some of these, Pamela. We'll kind of bounce around here. Would a survey be good? Of a good vehicle for, well, would it be good? Yeah, I think so. But would it be a good vehicle for converting event donors? If so, any examples? And I think what Gina here is asking is, would it be good for converting them from events to annual, monthly, major, and legacy? And the answer is 1,000% yes. In fact, for event donors and members, quote unquote members, and even people, one of our biggest clients, who's an international animal organization, I'm sorry, nature organization, uh, most of their legacy gifts and major gift leads come from people who never donated at all. In other words, they're coming from like Facebook and stuff, and then they end up taking the survey, and then they tell us their story. They become leads, and then the relationship. So they don't go up the pyramid. I mean, there is no pyramid. They just go from being a Facebook person to being a major donor or a legacy donor. How important is it to mail surveys rather than just providing them digitally? Okay, thanks, Emily. That's a brilliant question
Hmm.
because, um, look, if you have a lot of money, go ahead and mail them. If you don't have a lot of money, do it digitally. But I will tell you that you get a multiplier effect when you stack channels. So, in other words, if you do email and you
Yes.
do print together, it's going to be 1 plus 1 equals like 5. Okay. Any thoughts on that, Pamela?
I would just agree with you wholeheartedly. But I also know the challenges of being a small nonprofit. I know one of our students started out solely with email, and as they've grown their fundraising, they've incorporated more direct mail, so they tend to do both.
Great. And a lot of people, by the way, are saying that they're very excited to do surveys. So your last question, like I'm getting
Yeah.
resounding yeses, a lot of exclamation points on some of them. How do you decide? Bernie asks, how do you decide how many donors to survey? Well, that's a great question also. It depends on your budget, but if you're doing it digitally, I always recommend, if you have a small budget, start digitally. And if you do it right, the survey, again, funny enough, without asking for money, the survey will end up paying for itself and then some. And then you can reinvest that money in direct mail if you don't have, in doing the survey by direct mail. So how many is really up to you. If you have a really good digital email list, I would just start there with the whole list. Why not? Why not? Everybody counts. Everybody has an opinion, young, old, who knows? They should be given an opportunity to express themselves.
Exactly. And if you're really tiny, you could start with the letter that I used and just mail out 10 a day or 10 a week.
That's brilliant. Great, great, great advice. You know, you don't have to do it as a big campaign. It could just be something that it's a filler almost.
Exactly. I talk a lot about developing sound fundraising habits, and I think surveying is one of them.
Great.
Greg, do you mind if I interrupt real quick?
Go ahead.
Because you mentioned something during this presentation about the very quick survey right after a donor has made a donation online.
Yes.
You know that I've been doing this mystery shopping, maybe you don't know, for a couple years now where I haven't done it for a while, but I had been making 2 gifts a week online. And I've only seen that once. So I'm wondering if you have some examples you could share with me.
Yeah, well, yes and no. The yes is few and far between because unfortunately, there's always a different department involved in the annual fund, and for whatever reason, the silos get put up, and it becomes really challenging to get them to understand that look, they got their donation. We just want to generate some major gift leads and some planned gift leads because just because they gave 50 or $100 doesn't mean it's over. And if we survey them, we might be able to get $100,000. The example really is just that I can tell you it works. People will take the survey after they've left the gift or made the gift. I mean, for their annual fund gift, but you got to beg and plead and bribe your annual fund person to put a link in there to the survey and so on. Okay, ready? Are you ready for more questions? Because we've got a half dozen more.
Sure.
All right. Sorry here. How frequently do you recommend we survey our donors? So I think I kind of really already answered that one, saying that we recommend once a year. So I'm not going to go into that much already. Um, Boy, there's kind of a lot of like people just sort of saying that they're going to do it. So forgive me. That's why I'm sort of sorting through the hey, this was
I'm
great
excited.
kind of questions here, and I'm scrolling through them. Okay, so do you recommend surveys being anonymous to encourage greater participation, more honest feedback, or should you match surveys with a particular donor? Okay, this is a really interesting question, and what we have found is that the truth is that most people actually don't want to be anonymous. If you ask them if they want to be anonymous, they'll tell you they want to be anonymous. Okay. But the truth is, they don't want to be anonymous. They want you to know them. Uh, so, giving is a social construct. It's something that people want you, the organization, to be part of their life story and their family because your mission is so important and entwined with their life story and their backstory. So I say no. Do not make them anonymous. In fact, we strongly recommend on the printed surveys that you be sure to fill in their information, but as a customer service, so to speak, you ask them to update their name or address or phone number or whatever, and that way you can get it straight. You know, especially if something is wrong, then they can update it. Now, we get about 15% of the people who respond to surveys end up correcting the information. Now, online, forgetting about the print surveys, but online, what we do through our technology, which is fairly sophisticated, we make it so that even if there's 15 pages or 10 pages of questions, we make it so that the last page of the survey has the donor's their address and phone number and name and everything, and again it asks them to update the information. So this way what they end up doing is updating the record for your database for you. So if 15% of your responses end up correcting your file for you, and your database administrator needs to merge purge that into your database. So it's really important, I think, not to be anonymous. And then but the third reason is because of our tracking cookie technology. If you're working with us, of course, I'm being very assumptive here, but by knowing who we're surveying and who's answering the questions, that's how you get solid leads. You know who answered the questions and who wants to meet with you and who has a donor advised fund. And furthermore, then you're able to track their engagements with your organization online going forward, whether they download a video, they click on something here and there, they forward language to an advisor. So I guess what I'm saying is definitely do not do it anonymously. I think that's a resounding do not do. All right.
Great point. Did you happen to see the question from Krista? Krista asks, "What do you do if you aren't getting responses? Do you do a second mailing or a second email?" That's a
Yes,
tough one.
but yes and no. If you're not getting responses, there is something terribly, terribly wrong. It either means
Yeah.
that your mission is way, way unappealing, or you've already beaten your donors with a stick, and or you've spammed them and made them angry, or the current approach that you're using for that engagement is just way off base. I have never seen people who love an organization not willing to engage. So if that's the case, either fire your vendor or call me instantly. Okay, a couple more. Will there be handouts? Yes, there will be handouts. We're not going to give away every example in the handouts, but there will be some. Is there a high response to age-oriented questions? Thanks, Art. Age, yes. Everybody fill. We never have drop-offs on the age questions. What are the response rates for direct mail surveys versus online surveys? That's a good question, but it really depends on the list. So if your list is direct mail responsive, and if, for instance, you bought or appended emails which never ever work, don't append emails. It's a waste of time and money. If you did that, then the direct mail is going to work better. But if you have a digital oriented, digital responsive crowd, then they will be very, very responsive. It all depends on your list, and there's no one exact answer. I think I'm getting pretty close to the
Yeah.
end
Well,
here.
Rich, did you answer Rich's question? He asks, "What percentage of American donors leave legacy gifts?"
Brilliant. Yes. So if I remember right, this is probably a Dr. Russell James stat. I think it's 5.3% leave legacy gifts. But what's interesting about that is that about 33%, if I remember right, say that they would consider it. So that's a terrible failure on the part of the nonprofit community, because if 5% do it but 33% say that they would consider doing it, what's going on here?
Hmm.
Somehow we're failing to take care of them and answer questions, or something. Something's going on there. I've got more questions here too. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. They keep coming in, if that's okay. Would
Yeah,
you be more likely to allow anonymity if you're just doing a donor satisfaction survey as opposed to gathering other
that's a good
demographic
question.
info? So that's from Sue. That's a good question. I would say yes, but no, and I'm very biased in this direction. So just full disclosure is that my personal mission is to raise massive amounts of money for nonprofits, and that means with major gifts and legacy gifts is usually the easiest way to get big gifts. So if you're gonna um, uh, outreach, perform an outreach function without generating leads for major gifts and legacy gifts, I just kind of think I'm just not exactly sure how much you would gain from that. As far as doing a donor satisfaction, I just don't. To me, that's leaving money on the table by not allowing people to lean in and be recognized for having made a gift in their will or being interested. Do you have any thoughts on that, Pamela?
I tend to agree with you. Yeah, I definitely think that's not a good idea. I'm sorry, I was just looking through the questions and I kind of got
Oh, okay,
distracted.
not a problem. Okay, Amy's got one. Do you recommend major gift officers leaving surveys for donors to complete and send in after the visit? Brilliant, brilliant, Amy.
Yeah,
I would give you a gold star. Yes. Essentially, we're in the customer service business. So,
yeah.
yeah, how about after my visit, you tell my boss how I'm doing? I don't know. Why not? I think that would be, everybody could use improvement. There's one thing that I really dislike, and this is what I call show up and throw up fundraising. So you may have seen my graphics on this fly around the internet, but too often a gift officer will want to tell. But as we say in the private sector, telling is not selling, listening is selling. So listening is also
Absolutely.
fundraising. And look, if a gift officer is going and doing the show up and throw up fundraising, that organization needs to know that's not good. So I recommend it. What do you think, Pamela?
I think so too. I think that's an absolutely brilliant idea, Amy.
Yay, Amy. Look, there's still a lot of people on the line, so I'm going to keep going through these questions. Someone directed this one to me. Greg, ever seen data regarding asking that Q? The
Oh, the
question
question about family childlessness, if that does
with
that
that
just depress response?
I have never seen a drop off there. I have not seen a drop off there. And we can track where people are dropping off, and it's usually not there. The place where people drop off in surveys is usually when. So this goes to talking about like marketing departments and PR departments and stuff. But when the marketing department or the PR department or the CEO's kid decides that there are certain questions that need to be asked, and they're usually very complex questions or with multiple steps or lots of big words and stuff and three-part answers. That's what depresses response and gets people to stop taking the survey. But no, when it comes to the family, no, I've never seen drop-offs there. So let's see. Any tips or recommendations for smaller shops on managing the follow up from surveys? So you're a small shop person, Pamela. I think I better leave this one
Yeah,
to
that's a
you.
great question. It's Alicia? Ali? I wonder how she pronounces that.
Alicia looks like. Thank you.
You
Elika.
know, you always have to work with what you have, and if you've got really, really limited resources, you can do it in batches. Just make a plan for how you're going to be processing them once you get them back, but maybe do, I don't know how small you are, but I think batching is the best way to go. You do maybe 10, 20, 50 a week until you've surveyed your whole donor base, maybe 100 a week. Do you have any other ideas, Greg?
Um, well, let's see. Um, the whole idea for me is that it's about prioritization for responding
Mm-hmm.
to donors. So I think, and of course, I'm the inventor of our technology. Is that I tried to create a scoring system that would indicate likelihood of giving and giving big gifts. So I think you want to sort through your surveys if you're not working with us to determine who's most likely to meet with you, who's most likely to give the biggest gift. So the 84-year-old who said that they want to talk to a gift officer, they have a donor advised fund, they have a family foundation, they have no children, your mission is most important. You get the point. Call that one first. and that would be, it's all about prioritization. And if you're getting so much response rate, you really ought to get all hands on deck. Get your CEO, get your executive director, get other people, program people to help you. How about board members? It's these leads, they are leads, are hot. And people have engaged. They've taken time out of their lives to express themselves. So don't leave them dying on the vine. And I think with that, we have exhausted all the questions. So I'm going to, I'm exhausted. This was a lot. So I'm going to
Nobody understands how exhausting webinars can be.
yeah. So, with that, if anyone else has any more questions, you can, of course, feel free to reach out to Pamela Grow. And this is Greg Warner here at MarketSmart. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. And a very special thank you to you, Pamela, for taking all the time to put this together and to give us your insights and expertise. It's been a true pleasure. And I'm so thankful for you and your time. So, thank you
This
very
has been so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and everybody, please take the survey that pops up after this webinar. All right.
Very cool. Thanks.
All right. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.